I'm back with another ghost story for you today. Well, ghost story, not ghost story. Either way, it is beyond cray-cray. I'm going to talk to you about the mystery, mayhem, and madness that surrounds the Cecil Hotel in Los Angeles, California. In 1924, a hotelier named William Banks Hanner spent about $1 million building the Cecil Hotel, which in today's money is about $13 million. The place was crazy swanky. It had a beautiful Art Deco design, marble, stained glass windows, the whole shebang. And as a matter of fact, if these stories sound familiar, or if you happen to look at pictures and those look familiar, it could be because the stories of the Cecil were actually inspiration for the hotel season of American Horror Story. We're not off to a good start. So big problems started to arise for the Cecil when, despite its opulence and grandeur, the neighborhood around it started to deteriorate. It started to see a lot of homelessness and people who were mentally ill, and those people were often just dropped off once they moved out of institutions. And thus, that whole area became known as the infamous Skid Row. Now, that being said, one can't help but wonder if it was the neighborhood responsible for the hotel's decline, or if the absolute sinister energy emanating from the hotel is what caused the neighborhood's downfall. I mean, you guys, I lack words for how absolutely terrifying this hotel really is. It only took 7 years for the Cecil Hotel to see its first death. In 1931, W.K. Norton's body was found next to a pile of poison pills. That was number 1. After that, the deaths just kept rolling in. It was like the Cecil just called out to people who were seriously hurting or in pain or just needed a way out. Not to mention those who were just of the darker variety. In 1934, Army Sergeant Louis D. Borden slashed his throat with a razor. He was still among the first to commit suicide or die in the Cecil Hotel. In 1937, 25-year-old Grace E. Margot was the fourth to die. She fell from the 9th floor, totally wrapped in telephone wires. The police were never actually able to determine whether her death was a suicide, an accident, or something more sinister. And I mean, that whole thing sounds kind of sus to me. I want to know how she ended up with the telephone cords all wrapped around her body prior to jumping out or falling out of the window. Then, about 4 years after the Army sergeant's death, so about 1937, 1938, Ray Thompson of the Marine Corps jumped from the Cecil to commit suicide, and he was later found on the roof of a neighboring building. Maybe not the most tragic death at the Cecil Hotel, but definitely one of them was committed by Dorothy Jean Purcell in 1944. 19-year-old Purcell checked into the Cecil Hotel with her 38-year-old boyfriend, Ben Levine, and unbeknownst to her, she happened to be pregnant at the time. During their stay, Purcell gave birth to a baby boy, whom she thought was dead at the time of birth. Thinking the child was dead, Purcell tossed the baby out their hotel window. The child was found several days later on the roof of an adjacent building. Purcell went to trial and pleaded temporary insanity and ended up being acquitted of the murder charges. If that alone doesn't tweak you the out, I don't know what will. In 1947, just before her murder, people claim to have witnessed the Black Dahlia. Yes, that one. Now, a lot of people say that that story is under suspicion. They can't confirm nor deny it, but it's definitely worth talking about here because the whole hotel is suspicious. And if the Black Dahlia was in fact seen drinking at the Cecil's Hotel, that adds a whole nother layer of cray-cray to the Cecil Hotel and to the Black Dahlia's murder. Like, as if that particular story couldn't possibly be any more damaging to those of us who are familiar with it. Now, moving forward to 1962, we come to Pauline Otton, who leaps from the Cecil Hotel to her death after having an argument with her husband. Unfortunately, a man named George Giannotti happened to be walking by at the time, and Miss Otton landed on and killed instantly the unsuspecting Mr. Giannotti. Now, when police found Otton and Giannotti at the scene and saw that their bodies were intertwined, that the two had been lovers and leaped to their deaths together. However, and this is so macabre that I can barely even stand it, upon further inspection of the crime scene, the police noticed that Giannotti's shoes were still on his feet, and had he leaped from the building, his shoes surely would have fallen off during the fall. In 1964, a very well-known and loved personality in the area named Pigeon Goldie, known as such because she was always seen feeding the pigeons in the local park, was found dead in her hotel room. She had been beaten, stabbed, and sexually abused by her killer. Despite finding a man walking the streets who was covered in blood, the police had questioned him, checked him out, and ended up deciding that he was not her killer and released him. Pigeon Goldie's killer was never found. Now, in 1984, a man named Richard Ramirez, you might know him as the Night Stalker, checked into the Cecil Hotel. He kind of used the Cecil as a base camp while he was out committing murders. When he came back from committing said murders, he would even dispose of his bloody clothes in the dumpsters behind the hotel. How did nobody notice this, you ask? Well, it's said that in the 1980s especially, the Cecil Hotel was so full of nefarious characters that nobody even noticed Richard Ramirez coming into the hotel covered in bloody clothes, and he just got away with it. Rumor also has it that Ramirez might have been conducting some rituals of the darker kind in his hotel room. There is speculation that Ramirez dabbled in devil worship and stuff like that, if you subscribe to that sort of thing. Now, the really crazy thing about the Cecil is it didn't only see one serial killer, because in 1991, a guy named Jack Unterweger checked into the Cecil. Now, what nobody really knew at the time was that Unterweger had been arrested and convicted of murder in his home country. When he was released from jail, he came on over to the United States, went to LA, and posed as an investigative journalist doing a story on the red light district, and had even done ride-alongs with police officers. All the while, he was continuing his killing right here in the good old US of A, going right into those red light districts, picking up sex workers, bringing them back to the Cecil Hotel, tying them up, and murdering them. Now, yes, ultimately, Unterweger was found out, caught by police, sentenced to jail time, but he still found a way out because he committed suicide in jail using the same exact knots that he used to kill the women in the Cecil. And all of this brings us to 2013 and the case that I'm sure most, if not all of you, are familiar with. And that is Elisa Lam. Now, if you're at all familiar with Elisa Lam's case, then you know that her story could take a video, two, maybe even more, to discuss the intricacies and details in full. I don't have that kind of time in just one video, although, hey, if you guys want to discuss it, I'd be happy to make a video just based on Elisa Lamb's story. That being said, just to gloss over it and talk about the details of the story, Elisa Lam was a college student from Canada who came to LA on vacation. She was alone. She hadn't really been anywhere outside of Canada before, so it was a major trip for her. Elisa checked in to the Cecil Hotel, but she never checked out. Last known video of Elisa, which is available all over the web. If you haven't seen it, I suggest you watch it because it is wild and heart-wrenching and absolutely mysterious all at the same time, is a video of her in an elevator at the Cecil. In the video, you see Elisa looking erratic and disturbed by something and almost confused, but she also definitely looks frightened. The whole thing is just very bizarre. There are also a lot of questions about whether the video was tampered with and timestamps being incorrect, and just a lot of questions about whether the video is as it was recorded or if somebody altered it. Elisa was missing for about somewhere near 2 weeks before a maintenance worker found her in a water tank on the roof of the Cecil Hotel. It's important to note that the reason the maintenance worker had been sent to the water tank was because a lot of the guests at the Cecil had been complaining about bad water pressure and the water tasting and smelling funny. So this whole case is disturbing on a multitude of levels. One, that Elisa had been found in the water tank, but also that all of these guests and residents at the Cecil had been drinking and bathing in this water where her body had been decomposing for like around 2 weeks. But as soon as Elisa was found, there were more questions than answers. Elisa was naked in the water tank, her clothes in there along with her, and the door to the water tank was closed. Now, initially, police and other investigators said there's no way that little Elisa could have closed the door to the water tank behind her, especially because she was submerged in water once she got in. But eventually they changed their story and said she had to have been the one that closed it because they couldn't find any evidence of somebody being up there with her. And to me, that whole story sounds insane because I don't know how anybody could possibly close a door like that, especially someone as small as her, without some kind of superhuman strength, you know, or the ability to walk on water. So like any good skeptic, I feel like, hey, someone did this girl wrong, and I'm looking at you, LA Police Department. My upset mom face. Anyway, the nature of Elisa Lamb's story has left the doors open for all kinds of occult leanings. Basically, there'd be a lot of theories, yo. Like, was she possessed? Was there something that led her up there? Like, maybe a ghost or some sort of crazy entity? There are just a lot of questions that circle around Elisa's death. Like, especially because they changed her cause of death multiple times. First, it was an accident, and then it was undetermined, and then they switched it back to an accident. So, what was it? Do we get any answers? Probably not. We're going to keep speculating, and ghost hunters are going to keep questioning what really happened, because there's a lot of occult stuff and weird and darkness that circles around the Cecil Hotel. But you guys, don't go thinking that's the end of it, because I found one more death that happened in 2015 It was a suicide committed by an unnamed man. Now, I personally think that all the dark energy and mysterious happenings and grisly deaths are pretty much enough to go on as far as paranormal activity goes inside the Cecil. Like, that's enough evidence for me that there's some sinister going down in that hotel. However, I did do some research and try to find evidence of hauntings that are happening inside the walls. Now, I'm not going to lie, most people are so focused on the place's history that nobody's really talking about actual, for real hauntings. However, leave it to Ghost Adventures, if you trust those guys. They did do an episode inside the wall of the Cecil Hotel. Now, you can find the episode on the Discovery Channel app, but I did keep track of some of the stuff that they found in the episode. They spoke with a man named Patrick, who was a former LAPD crime scene photographer, and he claims that when he spent the night at the Cecil, he woke up to a feeling like somebody was grabbing his throat and strangling him, which subsequently freaked him out, and he skedaddled real fast. During their investigation, the elevators moved up and down by themselves. There were also cold spots, disembodied voices and screams. They collected some voices and words on EVP, and at one point, a faucet turned on by itself. Now, I happen to be a big fan of Zach and the guys, and usually find their evidence kind of compelling, so what you believe and what you don't regarding their episode is kind of up to you. You might take it with a grain of salt, you might really be into it. You can make that decision for yourself. And in case you're wondering, the Cecil is now closed. It was bought a few years ago by a different hotelier, and he had planned to make a lot of changes to the place, installing a gym, putting a pool on the roof, changing everything around. Unfortunately, due to some zoning issues and some maybe weird shit that was happening inside the hotel, construction's been halted. So the Cecil sits just as it was, on Skid Row, untouched. That's it for right now, guys. I'm going to go put some lashes on, and I'll be right back with your final look. This is it, my beauty corns. This is our final look. Do you like it? I'm loving it. Anyway, you guys, this is it for this week. I'm so glad you came back to hang out with me. I hope you'll come back again. Remember to always love yourself, always be a unicorn, and we'll see you next time. Bye!